some of the numbers I've seen are about 20 million mattresses every year are go to the garbage or are recycled in the US, for instance. But then you see numbers of lifespan of a mattress being 7 to 10 years. So that would bring it up to about 30 or 40 million. In the Canadian context, assuming similar behavior and lifespan, that's about 2 to 4 million mattresses every year. Which if you think about that for a second, I mean, a mattress is a big object. 4 million mattresses just for Canada, like that's a huge amount of space. And that's, again, part of the problem. So they're big and they don't compress well. So in landfill, they're resistant to breaking down, both the materials, but also the way what their purpose is. So it's a really a major challenge, taking up so much space. And then also the springs, they can get tangled up in machinery. Again, another challenge, and that's why some landfills don't want to touch them.
Still within the environmental theme, we've had previous episodes talking about, for example, having chemicals in our cleaning products or in our beauty products. I have never really thought of chemicals in my mattress, but the more I was researching, it sounds like I don't think it was a negative reason as to why it was initially done, but traditional mattresses actually do have quite a bit of toxic chemicals. Can you speak to maybe the history there and then what that current landscape looks like?
Yeah, I mean, originally going quite a few years back, most mattresses would have been made from cotton and wool. But now moving to synthetics is quite a bit easier and cheaper to make a mattress. So that's part of the reason, just economies of scale and consistency in terms of knowing what the manufacturer is working with versus natural products is a little bit harder. And then also it's just faster. So a lot of glues are used in new mattresses to glue the different layers together. So you don't need as much skill for the person who's doing the assembly. Again, that's attractive to some manufacturers. But if you keep racing towards quicker, faster, cheaper, cheaper being a big piece too, it's you compromise on the build quality of the product at some point. So it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm a really big fan of the precautionary principle, which is if we don't know, let's make sure we test everything and we can make a great mattress without having to use synthetics and chemicals where we don't know the effect necessarily long term.
Is it worse with these mattresses that you're seeing on social media, people just like unpacking this small box and it explodes to a mattress? I can't imagine that is the most natural material in there.
No, definitely not. Although I think there might be one or two who are experimenting in that. Like when those came on, probably about 5 or 10 years ago now, it was attractive. I mean, these are, this is a great way to ship a product that's not really unwieldy and difficult. But our suppliers were telling us, don't think about it. Like, don't do it because it can compromise the longevity. You compress something down to, a half inch, a 12-inch mattress down to a half an inch. There can be after effects of that. And then as far as natural, natural materials won't compress down like that typically, or at least most won't. So you're talking about some sort of foams that will spring back. Again, convenience versus, what probably is the best thing to do.
Well, I think awareness is the first part of that. Again, admittedly, I had not really thought of mattresses that much until getting ready for this episode. And then the more I was researching Black Sheep Mattress Company, what you're doing is really disruptive in the space in terms of leveraging non-toxic organic materials. And so could you speak to maybe why you started that process? And then you've been around for over a decade at this point. Can you speak to maybe, was there a transition even in the materials that you used during this time?
Good question. So about 15 years ago, I was shopping for a mattress, and I don't always do this, but I do have interest in natural and sustainable, and I was looking for something in that area with a mattress, and there just wasn't very many options or anything that I could find. So that's what started the process for me. It seemed like it should be a reasonable option. I went down the rabbit hole of research and talking to different people. And so here we are. So we never really were not doing non-sustainable materials as such. This has always been a major driver for us. But yeah, that's what motivates me. The team itself is, I think that's probably a really fun part for me the last 10 years or so, or 5 years, is that they're very motivated by what we do. They might not say it every day, but it's a major motivator and gets us out of bed in the morning, I think, doing the right thing. Yeah.
And I know a lot of us, myself included, who care a lot about maybe lowering our environmental footprint, also care about animal welfare in general. And so in shifting to these natural products, you're leveraging wool being one of the products that are going into your mattresses. How do you select your suppliers to make sure that consideration is taken into account?
The reality is it's about relationships. And so it's a lot and trust. It's a lot of work up front, vetting and having conversations and visiting, and just making sure we're aligned in our values. Animal welfare is huge for us too. And there can't, for wool, for instance, there are less than ideal practices that are still being done. But we definitely seek out those who are, aligned again with what we want. So animal welfare is part of what their mission is. And then we just keep the conversation going continually, and once you have those relationships, it's not too bad, but developing initially is a bit of work for sure.
We often think of natural, non-toxic when we think of the environmental consideration, but we often also talk about things being local. And this is one of the things that I was saying that I just have never thought of up until the research of this episode. Is I work in the tech space, and there's a lot of conversations about things being produced in Asia and the impacts of shipping that in. But mattresses might be different. Are mattresses typically produced locally? I just can't even imagine them, coming over by boat or by plane. So I'd imagine so, but I've never really given it any thought.
No. It's funny. I don't think most people think about, where are they made, and just like what you're saying, a lot of things are made at distance, and then there's complications of traveling. I think, I don't know the numbers, but I do, from what I know, a lot of mattresses are made fairly locally. So if you're in Ontario, chances are your mattress was made in Ontario. If you're in Alberta. That being said, a lot of the components that go into making the mattress, whether it's the springs or the foam or that, are brought in from abroad. Okay. So those will have a larger footprint, as well with what we talked about earlier, the roll pack technology, the ability to make mattresses quite a bit smaller. I think you're seeing a lot more brought in from a distance. So maybe SNAO or Mexico, for instance. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but the ecological footprint of the transportation is growing.
The different initiatives that you have with Black Sheep Mattress Company, what really struck me was that I think you had originally opened in Calgary, so this seems to be where the program is set up, but you have a recycling partnership. And I think this is really unique because this is not, again, I don't think people are necessarily doing it to pollute when they're putting their mattresses out, but they don't necessarily know what to do with them. So could you speak to the recycling program in Calgary? And for our listeners who are not there, who are maybe interested in doing the more responsible thing when it is the end of life for their mattress, what could they do in terms of research?
Yeah, we're lucky. When we started, there was nothing in Calgary. So as far as a recycling program or anyone we could work with. And I mean, I think we looked very briefly into doing something ourselves, but it's a whole industry of itself. We work with Remat in Calgary. I know there's a really great organization in Edmonton. There's a few in Vancouver. So what they do is they break down the mattress into its different components. With springs, they separate out the metal, they separate out the foam, wood from the box spring, and then those go on to see a second life in some form or another. Sometimes under pad for flooring, or wood chips for landscaping, that kind of thing. For those outside of Calgary and the areas that we know, it's tough. Smaller municipalities, it almost doesn't make sense probably yet in terms of economies to get this set up. So they will partner, they will ship sometimes, or come to an agreement to ship these mattresses to a larger city where they have the facilities. It's just about doing the homework online and seeing what comes up locally to the individual. But our partnership with Remat has been fantastic. It feels so much better knowing that it's not just going to the landfill.
But if we as consumers are trying to extend the life cycle of our product, what would you recommend we do?
Yeah. So if it's something you already have, a good foundation can help. A lot of times that's one of the issues. So we find that, yeah, that can buy you a bit more time. Just having something solid, breathable. We like slats. That's kind of the thing that we recommend most often. Um, does depend on the quality of the mattress, which as a consumer is hard to know, despite what the marketing might be telling you. Uh, that's again one of our things, like, and I guess if you're buying something new, you could talk to whoever you're buying from, and ideally they're building for 20 years. That's what we try to do. So a normal person on normal firmness, that is very reasonable for how we build. But yeah, 7 to 10. And we get stories with people coming in with even less time on their mattress and it's not working for them, which is really sad. Not only customers wasting money, but it should be lasting longer. So good foundation, good mattress. Yeah, that's kind of what we recommend.
And beyond the recycling that you offer, you also have some really interesting upcycling initiatives going on within your organization. I always want to be mindful of the fact that I think us in the sustainability space, we tend to throw out terms and assume everybody knows what they mean. Would you mind maybe starting off by explaining the difference between recycling and upcycling, and then what different programs you have in place in terms of upcycling?
So the way we look at it for upcycling would be, for instance, we get one example would be like wool batting. So these big sheets of wool, and they might be not the correct size for the mattress. So we'll take off a strip off the sides or the head and the foot. It's perfectly good wool. It's beautiful material. But what do we do with that? So both from a cost point of view, it's like we don't want to throw it out. That just increases the cost of everything we do. But it's also a shame. It's just really sad. So what we try to do is find ways to reuse it, turn it into a brand new product that's desirable. One of those things is dryer balls. So we will felt them. We work with actually a company in Calgary that felts them for us. Something like this. So these help. You don't need those. Like it helps with the clothing not getting clumped in the dryer, sort of thing. And then we also turn some of our wool into duvets. So another company that we work with in Alberta that does that for us. Some of the scrap fabric that we, again, cut offs, we will turn those, we'll sew a few of those together and then put them into a bag in which we put our duvets or sometimes our pillows. So that's upcycling to us. And it's kind of really fun, actually, to find a use for it. And still make it look good and pretty. It's one of the better parts of the job, actually.